Hey, what's going on, cash flow hackers? It's Chris with Life 180, and I am back here again with Sean Walker from API Law. What's going on, man?
Hey, man, I'm excited to be here. We got a great topic today.
I agree. So last video, we talked about living trusts and revocable living trusts, to be specific, and utilizing them as a foundational asset in your life from a structural perspective to just make sure you're protected, to make sure your family's protected, to make sure your kids and your wife and your husband and your business partners, and ultimately you control and make sure you avoid probate and do all these different things. So if you haven't watched that yet, go back, watch that at the end of this video. I'll put the video on the end screen and you can go from there. But here's the bottom line. While we want to make sure that we have the revocable trust as the foundational component to our trust structure, at some point in time, hopefully, you're going to need asset protection, right? And I think what happens online on social media is people throw out this idea of like, use this trust for this and that and whatever, and it's fragmented, right? Yeah. It's siloed, and people are not realizing that you got to stack all this stuff together. You got to build it all together. It's all got to interconnect, interweave. And that's why the last video we did is so important, because you got to have that revocable trust as the foundation, right?
Correct.
But now when we start talking about, all right, I'm accumulating assets. I have some businesses. I have rental properties. I have investment accounts. I have different things that
precious
you want.
Metals, Bitcoin.
All these different assets that you could have that you say, hey, if something happens to me, I want to make sure nobody can take my stuff, right?
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And so I'd love to take this video, Sean, to have you go through some details and maybe share some stories and give some examples about what are the ways that people most commonly and most effectively utilize asset protection trusts in a way that's, actual real life, not this 90-second, TikTok reel story.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up TikTok reels, because when I hear somebody say, here's this one type of trust that fits everybody,
totally,
that's to me a red flag of that's just not the way it actually works in real life, especially with a law firm like us that specializes in asset protection. We're going to build around your business depending on what types of assets you have.
Yep.
The amount of equity in those assets is a key trigger for us to then make a recommendation for a certain legal instrument or tool. We're not going to tell you this one tool at this one price is going to solve all your problems. We actually work it in reverse.
Got it.
That makes sense.
So just for everybody watching, I want to kind of take a little step back and say, all right, when you're thinking about getting a trust, I think a lot of people don't do it because they're overwhelmed. I've seen so much information online. Like I saw a guy spend $50,000 on a spendthrift trust.
Yep.
I've seen people spend, and by the way, people that are worth like $1 million, maybe worth $2 million, spending 50 to 100 grand on trust formations, right? Which to me is mind numbing. The fact that people are sold on these, structures and ideas and concepts on the benefit that like you're going to be able to avoid taxes and you're going to be able like all these things. And
right.
Can you, as we start talking about asset protection, I think a lot of people are also concerned about, tax avoidance, tax mitigation, tax deferral, like all the, and I know we're not giving tax advice here, but
yes.
But it's one of those things where I think a lot of times when people think asset protection, they're thinking taxes at the same time,
yes,
right? Because it's the same, it is what it is. So how does that play into all this? Like, can you from a structural perspective, if somebody's looking at protecting assets, obviously there's going to be different trusts for different assets potentially.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to say it. Yeah, different tool depending on what the problem is.
Sure.
And our clients first come to us in many cases when they get a scare, meaning there's a potential lawsuit that comes at them. They have a business partner that, creates an HR problem within the company.
Yep.
And, that's typically when somebody comes to us to say, hey, how can I get advanced asset protection based on these particular problems that my business might face. And so, we might have clients that do spend, $30,000 to $50,000 with us, but maybe after 10 to 15 years, as we build it, as their assets grow and as their business grows, not the reverse.
Got
if
it.
that makes sense.
So that can, so it's important to start early.
Yeah, it really is. Let me give you an example of this.
Yeah.
And of course, we have attorney-client privilege, but I'll give a general scenario. And
Sure.
this has happened with a ton of people that have come to us, just so you know. But they'll set up a business partnership, all kind of DIY. Okay. And they'll go set it up on the state website. They just slap themselves in as partners because they watched a 10-minute video on how to set up an LLC in Nevada.
I think we've all done that.
Yeah, and I have too. I mean, my first group of rental properties was all in my name and my wife's name.
Okay.
The exact opposite way of how you want to do it. And my first scare was a tenant that flooded my place and then said her son got mold spores ingested within the first couple of hours of the flood.
Oh my gosh.
Which is physically impossible.
Right.
Okay. And she had a brother that was an attorney that wrote me a bunch of scare letters. Luckily, I had the truth on my side, but that made me really think, oh boy, I need some asset protection.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what we do is we'll take that client and we'll say, okay, what are your assets? And we have them fill out a form. Our paralegals do discovery calls and so forth. And we actually do a schematic or blueprint of what you have today. And our attorneys look at that, Chris, and say, if we were suing you, because we also do debt collection. So we wear the black hat, we wear the white hat as well.
That's cool.
So we can look at, like, say, your portfolio and say, hey, Chris, if we're suing you, here's how we're going to take not only your business stuff, but all your personal stuff. Okay. And a lot of people will say, I don't really need this, Sean, because I don't have a ton of assets when they first begin. But here's, guys, hopefully a huge light bulb for you. If your business has nothing other than a laptop and something goes wrong and you get a $300,000 judgment against your business, it doesn't mean that debt disappears. It just means that you don't have assets to go seize. But now the judge says, hey, you need to make payments of $1,000 a month until it's satisfied. That is a huge myth buster that most people think on why not to set up asset protection strategies in the early days.
Got it.
Okay, because I've had people that have been sued in the early days and lose everything. And now their idea, their concept, all their hard work is just gone because they didn't set up the right asset protection structure from the beginning.
So what's the difference between when we talk about asset protection trust? How do you do that effectively, utilizing different tools, whether it's revocable, irrevocable? When does it make sense potentially for either or? Do you have any stories, scenarios that would make sense?
Absolutely. So we have a lot of business owners that themselves have a high net worth. And that net worth can be because of personal assets, but many times it's because they own shares of a company they've built for the last 10, 20, 30 years. And that's totally appropriate. And a lot of times what we will recommend at a certain point with those business owners is that they separate themselves from their business. Okay. And one way to do that is to set up different types of asset protection trusts, and they're irrevocable in nature. So like we said at the beginning of the video, a standard estate plan is going to be a revocable living trust that's like a box during your lifetime. You can put assets in it, personal assets, and take them out or sell them during your lifetime. With an irrevocable trust, it's more permanent. Okay. And most of the time, once that asset goes in, only the trust can benefit from those profits, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But it does get it out of your personal name. Now, that does pose some problems for investors and business owners that want to have more control over their assets on a day-to-day type basis. So there are some hybrid type trusts that we utilize that are quite unique, and we call them domestic asset protection trusts. And in certain states, namely like Utah, Nevada, just to name a few, we domicile or set them up in these states so that these type of asset protection trusts have a lot more flexibility. Let me give you one kind of semi-funny example, and maybe it's not. If we have any doctors' wives listening, I apologize. But we do have quite a number of doctors that will set these up after they've been divorced. because they can then place assets of certain types of assets with certain types of debt service or no debt service against them into a domestic asset protection trust. And one of the exception clauses in Nevada especially is that child support alimony will not affect that, even before the look back period.
Interesting.
Okay. So again, there's these little subtleties on different types of trusts in different states that are used for very specific reasons. Like, if you're sitting there at the operating table and a doctor needs a scalpel, well, you're not going to hand him, a drill, for example. And it's the same thing here.
Yeah.
And so we get very, very specific with our clients. So if you have an online only type business versus a construction company where you've got employees and people out there that bad things can happen, there's going to be different liability silos that we're going to look at and place you in different tools depending on what type of business and assets you have.
So, and I think that's important to understand that it's not just one trust. It's not just one scenario or entity. You're creating different different entities for all these different use cases, and then setting up a complete structure with maybe like a holding company or something of that nature above and beyond everything else.
Absolutely.
Right?
And when you hear somebody online selling you a crescent wrench and says it's going to solve all your problems no matter what, that's when the red flags have to go up. And then you come to an actual law firm that specializes in these things and aren't going to charge you an exorbitant amount. And that's really how you can kind of determine if you're heading in the right direction with the advice that you're getting.
I love it. So what would you say to anybody who is kind of watching this video and is like, all right, I feel like I need to do something, right? Like whether it's a revocable or, the foundational trust, estate planning trust, or the asset protection trust or anything. But they're kind of like, I feel a little overwhelmed. It's just, there's a lot of complexity. I don't understand this stuff.
Yep.
People, it's the fight flight, right? Like people freeze a lot of times.
Yeah, no, I've been in that situation many times. And what I suggest is that you get with us and just get on with one of our paralegals on a quick discovery call. We don't charge. Our law firm has a different structure than most, to where most live and die by what we call billable hours for the paralegals and the attorneys. So it's not sometimes about giving the best advice, it's about getting more billable hours.
Totally.
And I'm not saying the whole industry is like that, but when it comes to asset protection, what you need is somebody that's going to intake the data about you and your business and the different liabilities that you may have now or in the future, and then start building the structure as you go. And we do that through what's called an API law blueprint, where we're going to look at your business again and say, hey, if we were suing you, how are we going to take all your stuff?
That's powerful.
Yeah, and then we give you the appropriate advice and so forth as you go. Yep.
And I think that's one of the reasons I love working with you guys, because our whole process is clarity, alignment, design. We want to get clarity about, where you're at, what's going on, the exposures. We want to create alignment with you being able to build something that you want to, is in alignment with what you're trying to create. And then we go out and design a plan accordingly. And so it's very similar. In that way.
Sorry, Chris.
No, you're good.
I just thought of a client that just came to us, and they own a lot of businesses, and they own a lot of rental properties, and they've put business income into acquiring more rental real estate, which is a great thing to do with profit.
Yeah, totally.
But what they have done, though, is some of their properties they've paid off free and clear and are cash. Some they still have debt service. So we didn't just say, put them all in a trust. We're taking the ones that they have free and clear, and we've recommended a domestic asset protection trust to own the LLCs that the properties are in, to own the membership units. That's a private document, so it's not on public record. It gets their names off of the businesses, so if they get sued personally, they can't come gobble up these assets. And the other assets that still have debt service on them, Chris, those are in an asset protection structure, but using LLCs and holding companies as opposed to an advanced method with a domestic asset protection trust.
And so the bottom line, like what I'm hearing and what I really want to make clear and convey, is the fact that there's these trust structures, but it's important to work with a law firm that'll be more consultative, that will be there with you, because I could buy a property right now, and I'm using, like, let's say one of the properties I'm using debt for right now. Like, I'm going through a process for a property in Missouri right now, right?
Yep.
So I'm using debt. I've got 30% going down on it, and I've got debt that I'm going to have for 70% of it, right? A DSCR loan, right? And so we're utilizing the income from the property to finance, the property after 30% down. The strategy for that property is going to change over time. As I have more equity, as the thing is paid down, as the appreciation goes up, the more equity I have in the property, the more exposure I have.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And so is it fair to say that what you do at the beginning can shift and can change?
Absolutely, especially in the lifetime of the asset.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So, and when you get more equity, there's some street smart tips that we can give you. One is the domestic asset protection trust strategy. Another is, let's say you have debt service, and let's say you're only at 20% LTV or lean to value, right? And you've got 80% equity sitting out there.
Yeah.
Sometimes we may recommend that you create a holding company in one of these haven states like in Nevada, Wyoming, or Delaware, and you do a secondary lien against that property.
Love it.
From yourself.
Totally.
Now, nobody can see that you own this asset. And now when a lawsuit comes your way, especially a frivolous one, that law firm that's representing that plaintiff is going to see, oh, this guy's upside down on that property. Therefore, the attorney is going to say, I don't know if I can get paid.
To get there.
Maybe an insurance claim if you have a real slip and fall.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
But also they might go back to that client and say, hey, rather than a free contingency here, we need now $20,000 because this investor is prepared. And I can see they've got these different LLC structures, and it's owned by Adapt.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a difficult fight, and you need to have some cash so we can win this. So sometimes through these domestic asset protection trusts and advanced planning strategies, we can actually make them go away by scaring them.
I love that. And the bottom line, like when I look at this, is I'm always thinking of the person who's watching this right now and thinking about like all the content that they've seen. And I'm thinking about it through the lens of, just because it might be the right thing for you to do right now doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the right thing in 10 years. Right, in 5 years and whatever, and because we're all growing, we're all expanding, we're all trying to create more wealth and doing, and the reality is, where I'm going to be 10 years from now is wildly different than where I am right now, and I'm not even going to try to pretend that I'm going to have any clue what that's going to look like, right? So whatever it is, I need to work with somebody that can help navigate me on a year-to-year, transaction by transaction basis, almost, to figure out what makes sense as my wealth creation kind of expands. And I need to make sure that when I'm setting this up for the first time, that I don't step in a bear trap and do the wrong structure that I can't unwind, that I can't.
Or creates more tax liability and you didn't know it. And we can't give you tax advice, but certainly we work with your tax planners, financial planners, or insurance brokers.
And you have amazing tax people you have access to if they need.
Yes,
I mean, that's a big thing as well, right? And so I think that's a big thing, and that the big thing I want to convey to people watching this video, if you're watching this and you're thinking, wow, I'm kind of fascinated by this, I'm curious, I've been looking at doing some stuff for myself, or I have some of this stuff set up. I'm not sure if it's set up properly. I'm sure he said a couple things that maybe tripped a couple switches in your brain. I would say just reach out because this is something you got to get right. If you do it and you get it wrong, the consequences can be catastrophic, quite frankly. And, at the same time, this is one of the most important, simple, straightforward things that you can do to make sure that you're protected, to make sure that your family is protected, your business is protected, your assets are protected, that multi-generations of your family line are protected. That's really what it comes down to. And so I know we talk a lot here about the Rockefeller method and all this stuff. We'll get there eventually. The reality is most people don't need that right away. Most people need the revocable trust, asset protection, stuff like that. And once you create enough wealth, now we can start talking about multi-generational stuff.
And the one thing I want to leave with everybody, it's all relative. So when you're starting out with your business, a $300,000 judgment, okay, to the guy that's been around 20 years that can stroke a check for that versus you starting out in your business, it can be devastating. So that's why it's even, relatively speaking, more important to get these structures in place from day one as opposed to later down the road.
I love it. I love it. Well, guys, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell. That way you're notified every time we launch a new video, because we've got a whole series on this content coming out. So make sure you are made aware of it. Make sure you turn on the notifications. That way you're notified when the videos come out. If you're curious and you want to talk to anybody at API Law or anybody at Life 180, go down in the link in the description below. I'll have the links to set up a clarity call with either one of us. And it's literally just that. Like you said, it's designed to just get clarity about what's going on in your life, to give you that guidance and clarity on what you have to do to make sure you're the most protected. So thanks a lot, Sean.
Thanks, Chris.
It's been fun. All right, guys. Until next time, have a blessed, inspirational day. We'll talk soon. See ya.